What is the purpose of typology? I mean, is it just so that you can brag to your friends that you know a bunch of stuff about psychological mumbo jumbo, or compete in competitions to try to type celebrities? Maybe it is for you. Maybe that's what you like to do, but it's not me. I look at it as with anything, there needs to be some kind of practical use for it. Now, sometimes that use is just, it's fun for me. But in general, if it's something that is not, entertaining people in some way, because that's my default thing. I'm an ESFP. I'm a performer. What I like to do is entertain people and perform for audiences and just have fun with people in the ways that I enjoy doing that. That's like my number one thing. Anything else that I do is sort of, it pales in comparison to that, but I still can enjoy doing it if there's something else I can get out of it. So when it comes to typology, a lot of people, the people that are into it the most and the people who talk about it tend to overwhelmingly be intuitive types, N types, because they tend to be more interested in the concepts and the theories more than sensing types are. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily better at figuring out types or discussing type or anything like that than sensing types. In fact, what I've found is that, and this is a general consensus, that sensing types are usually better at observing, human behavior, because they're actually spending less time thinking about the ramifications of the behavior than they are actually watching the behavior and paying attention. So that's sort of the double-edged sword there, is intuitive types might be better at sort of understanding some of the deeper elements of things, but they might miss a lot of things because they're not really paying as much attention physically, sensing-wise, as types who prefer sensing. So what is the what I see as the practical purpose of type? To me, it's two things: understanding and communication. And that's both for the self, for oneself, understanding yourself better, understanding other people better, and being able to communicate with people better. And the understanding really is about that communication. It's about communication, but it's also about things like forgiveness and tolerance and just the ability to get along with people in society. And also the sort of the other side of that, if that was a little too effy for some of the thinking types that are watching, especially like STPs, there's also sort of advantages that you can get on people, whether it's an out and out competition or just daily life, in business, in social situations where you're trying to sort of win the moment, win the day, so to speak, as SPs tend to be. You can do that more effectively if you understand other people's behavior and what they're showing you with what they're saying and doing. My son has, even at age 20 now, I won't say he's perfected that, but he has a very good understanding through type and through other observations, and in ways that has helped him a lot in life in terms of the way that he figures out people and the sort of tactical advantages that gives him in certain situations. So that's what I see the purpose of typology being, is, understanding people better, communicating with them better. And so I have seen that in action many, many times over the last several years, where people communicating with knowledge of type have sort of broken down walls of communication. It's a breakthrough in even long-term relationships that, parent and child relationships, spouse relationships, business, coworkers that, might work together, might get along basically, don't necessarily fight with each other all the time, but there's always a wall of communication. They can kind of make small talk. They can talk about a few things, but there's always somewhere where they hit a wall because they don't understand each other. They're so different in their types, and they don't have anything that sort of breaks that down. If they learn personality types, then they have that avenue. And I've seen it happen where people that used to be in that situation where they sort of barely got along, just got along how they had to, but not any kind of real understanding, can then be the type of people who can have hours and hours of conversations and constantly be not only learning about each other, but also making breakthroughs and learning about other people that they know in their lives, other family members, friends, romantic relationships, all of that sort of thing, just by virtue of knowing these things. And so if the practical purpose of typology is better understanding, better communication, then logically, what you should deal with when it comes to the system or the avenue of typology that you utilize should be what is most mass appeal, most easy to understand, no matter what somebody's type is. So rather than starting, as some people do, deep in the weeds with Carl Jung's psychological types and trying to teach somebody, what extroverted feeling means, or, going deep into Enneagram or some of these other systems that get really, really complicated, when you really get into all of the factors of them. I personally believe that the best way is to start with the basic temperament. And 4-temperament theory is a very old concept. There's many people who've done it different ways. I personally think David Kersey had the best grasp and understanding of it. I know there are people that they hear his name and they all of a sudden are like, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking. He's stereotypes and blah, 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 blah. I think most of those people who act like that have never actually read much of Kersey's actual work, because it's not just, some things you see on the internet that sometimes there's quotes attributed to him that he didn't even say. Somebody else made them up and then he gets the blame for them. David Kersey did a ton, in mainstreaming temperament theory and Isabel Myers and Myers-Briggs theory. He was an advocate for that. And unfortunately, in online type communities, we've reached this point where there seems to be this divide between Jung followers and Kersey, as if they should be diametrically opposed or something. I don't believe that's the case. But if you ask me to choose, you say it has to be one or the other, I'm going to go with Kersey, because if you use the principles in Kersey temperament theory, you can observe them in real life on a daily basis over and over again. You don't have to go to some long course and try to learn all these things and in the deep realms of Jungian function theory. And before somebody's like, well, it's not that hard to learn Jung, you just read that. The problem is that everybody seems to have a different definition. They don't go off Carl Jung's actual definitions, or if they do, they distort them in a way that sort of fits their own kind of way of looking at it. Whereas if you look at David Kersey's work, things are very simple. You really don't have to get that complicated with. Now, you can a little more if you want to. And in books like Brains and Careers and Personology, he got a little more into the weeds, so to speak, with some of the factors that he discussed in the first two, the Please Understand Me books, 1 and 2. But anyway, Kersey and Myers-Briggs, I think sort of learning the best principles from both of them are the most effective way to use typology. And I really don't think it's a good idea to start with functions. So many times in type forums, Facebook, things like that, I see people say, well, somebody says, well, I'm having trouble with my type. And their response is like, well, learn the functions and then it'll be easy. Every time I see that, I'm just like, that's just a facepalm to me. Like, why are you trying to get somebody to, because 9 times out of 10, you tell somebody that, and one of two things, either they lose interest or they're not going to try to figure that out in the first place because it's too complicated, or they're just going to search for something about function online, and they're going to find 800 different sources with 800 definitions of all of that and basically go nowhere. Whereas if you start with basic temperament and you work from there, and then you go to the 16 types, and you talk about those differences, you're much more likely to find an actual use in daily life for most people. The average person on the street is never going to delve deeply into Jungian function theory, but they can understand the difference between guardian and artisan, idealist, rational. They can understand NFSP, and even eventually the difference between, say, an ESTJ and an ISTP. They can start to learn those things for whatever label that they're given, even if it's Keirsey's labels or it's Myers. They can get to a point where they understand these things. So to me, purpose of typology is understanding and communication, not competition in the sense of trying to be some sort of expert on the deep processes of things, not to be able to have little goofy conversations about, oh, well, that was my inferior FE going to the bank, all these kind of useless things. And, I call them useless. If they're not useless to you, hey, great, have fun with that. But stop going into, this is a big pet peeve of mine, is people that they go into Facebook groups or forums that are set up for a Myers-Briggs type or Myers-Briggs discussion. And they start basically trying to say, oh, well, my MBTI sucks and my system of Jungian blah, blah, blah is superior because of the fault. Cut that out, okay? Nobody asked you to do that, and you're not helping anything. No one is understanding anything better because you're doing that. All you're doing is complicating things, confusing people, wasting people's time, and just in general being an annoyance. So that's, the main thing I want to get across in this video is what type really is. This video has been needed for a while, and I have some more things to say about that, but I'm going to wrap this up now because I don't want this to be super long. I made my main points. So that's what I want to get across, especially because if there's anybody who's new to type, this is the first video you've seen about it, and it piques your interest. I don't want to get it deep into a whole thing about the problems I see with things that you may not have even encountered. But I had to get that off my chest while I was talking about it because I've been wanting to do a video talking about that for a while, and I haven't been for other reasons. So I had to get that out there. But more to come. I'm doing this Type Tuesday thing. So as my plan at this point is every Tuesday to upload a video that talks about type. Hopefully most of them will be shorter. But again, I've sort of got a backlog of things I wanted to talk about. So some of them, at the beginning, I'm taking a little bit to get some things out there. So thanks for watching. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. Share this with anybody that you can who needs to see it. I'll be sharing it myself with people that, some areas that need to hear this. And I hope you will too. So thanks for watching. See you next time.